Hi everybody, I'm Tabitha, and today we're going to do some book reviews. Regular watchers of this channel will already know this, but I do book reviews every time I've read 5 books. You should know that I don't read just one specific age category or genre. I'm actually a reader of pretty much anything, so I will make sure to tell you what age category, what genre it is, and more importantly, what kind of readers I think will love the book that I'm reviewing. I do use a 5-star rating system to review all my books, so I'd like to take a quick second to tell you about that system. 5-star ratings are reserved for books that I absolutely love, that I think transcend genre. In other words, you might love this one even if you don't normally read the genre it's written in. 4-star books, on the other hand, are books that I absolutely love and think are great books, but they're more specific to the genre they are written for. 3-star ratings are for books that I think are good books, but they have a really niche audience. You might not love this one, even if you normally read this genre. 2-star ratings are the ratings I reserve for books that I think are problematic. I do try to explain some of the problems in the what I didn't love section so that you know if it's the kind of thing that would really bother you or not. 1-star rating, on the other hand, are reserved for books that I honestly didn't enjoy and can't recommend. They're just not for me. All right, with that out of the way, let's get to the reviews. The first book that I've read since the last time I did reviews is 50/50 by James Patterson and Candice Fox. This is a 2017 release by Cornerstone Digital. It is 377 pages. Age category I would say is adult, and this book genre is mystery thriller. Your synopsis. Harriet Blue, detective and star of the previous book, Never Never, has been banished to the small outback town of Last Chance Valley, where a diary found on the roadside outlines a shocking plan to massacre the entire town. So what didn't I like about this book? The first thing I can say, and this is a big one, ladies and gentlemen, is that I was not invested in this mystery at all. That's an interesting problem for me because usually mystery books hook me right in and have me trying to figure out exactly what's going on and who was responsible. This one, I found myself incredibly bored by the problems and not at all interested in knowing who did it. That's a problem. The second thing I didn't like about this one is Harriet herself. I didn't particularly like her in the first book, but I made mention in my review of liking the fact that she's a loose cannon cowboy type. Now, after finding Kylie, who is the main character in Patterson's NYPD Red series, I've seen that I can walk away from Harriet. Patterson has done a better job of writing loose cannon cowboy types that happen to be woman cops, and Harriet is one that I'm more than willing to leave in the dust. The other thing about this one is that there are 2 or more storylines in this book, and honestly, they're completely unrelated. I don't remember this ever bothering me before, but I have a feeling this relates back to the fact that I wasn't invested. If you have 2 or 3 different storylines and I'm not invested in any of them and they don't relate, I'm really checking out on your book completely. The final thing I can say I didn't like about this one is the ending. Cliffhangers only work if the reader is invested enough in the story to keep reading. So for me, this one didn't work. So what did I like about this book? There's really only one thing I can say I liked about this one, and that is the opening chapters follow a storyline dealing with a woman who's abducted. I liked her chapters. I liked the way we were there with her as she was scheming and plotting for how she was going to get out of this situation. I wanted more of her chapters and for her to have a bigger role in the story. Basically, when her chapters ended, I checked out of this book. Who do I think should read this one? I am not sure that I'm comfortable recommending this one to anyone. If you really like thrillers with short, fast chapters, I can give you better recommendations. If you've read this one and you enjoyed it, I'm going to ask you to comment below with what you loved about this one and what your favorite part was so that other readers can connect with what they might like about this book as well. My rating shouldn't come as much of a surprise. When I say I'm not comfortable rating it, the rating I have to give a book is 1 star. For this one, I was just disappointed, disinterested, and completely checked out of the plot. So 1 star for 50/50 by James Patterson and Candice Fox. The next book I've read since the last time I reviewed is I'll Be There For You by Kelsey Miller. This is a 2018 release by Hanover Square Press. It is 304 pages. Age category, I would say, is adult, and this is a nonfiction title. Your synopsis. When Friends, the TV show, debuted back in 1994, no one anticipated the sensation it would become. Take a journey back through the history of the TV show's most powerful moments with pop culture expert Kelsey Miller. What didn't I like about this one? I can say that the first couple chapters of this one are a little bit slow. It's going into the history of the writers as opposed to the history of the show, which has a slower start, especially when we're huge fans of the show, the storylines, and the characters that we've seen on it. It is interesting, it's just slower when compared to the rest of the book. The second thing I didn't like about this one is there is part of this story that deals with the contract negotiations. It's a part of the story I've already heard before. It's probably arguably one of the most famous things about the cast, how they argued for their contract negotiations. That part also was a little slow, but possibly because, like I said, I've heard that before. The third thing I didn't particularly like about this one is that there were a few things, since I'm such a diehard Friends fan, that I already knew. I should mention that I am ridiculously in love with this show, so it really shouldn't surprise me that I heard some things that I've heard before, but that could bother people who were hoping for all new things that they've never heard. So what did I like about this one? Well, the first thing I can say is, you know those things that you find online that promise like 10 things you never knew about the TV show Friends? I always read those, and I always knew everything they tell you. I was a little afraid that this book was going to be exactly like that, filled with facts and things that I already knew about my favorite show. It wasn't. This book was filled with little anecdotes that even I hadn't heard, and I absolutely loved that. The second thing that I like about this book is the way that it tackles how the Friends show handled September 11th. That section of this book was worth the read alone. They did a remarkable job of handling it, and I loved their explanations for it. Recommended for that. The third thing that I liked about this is that this book takes an honest look at some of the problematic elements of the show and tackles them head on, and I appreciated that take. So who do I think should read this one? If you're a big Friends fan who regularly reads those articles about the TV show, I think that you're going to love this book, and it's going to give you at least one thing that you didn't know before. I also think that if you, in general, like nonfiction books about pop culture things in our lives, you're going to like this one, because that's exactly what it's taking a look at. My overall rating, I should say 3 stars, because this one does have a very niche audience. You have to like nonfiction, and you have to like the show Friends. But honestly, there's so many of us out there who are in love with the show Friends, I feel comfortable saying this one is 4 stars. So 4 stars for I'll Be There For You by Kelsey Miller. The third book that I've read since last time I reviewed is The Automation by BLA. This is a 2010 publication by SOB Publishing. It is 360 pages long. Age category, I would say adult, and genre, fantasy. I should mention that this book was sent to me by the publisher SOB Publishing in exchange for an honest review. Your synopsis. Otis finds his life falling apart when a stranger commits suicide and passes on his soul-attached automation for Otis without Otis's permission. So what didn't I like about this book? The first thing I can say I didn't like about this one is the formatting. Each chapter here ends in a summary that sort of was odd, hard to follow, and in my opinion, completely unnecessary. If you read the chapter, you don't need a summary. While I'm talking about formatting, I should also mention that I didn't like the way each chapter kind of flowed into another rather than starting on its own page, and that there were random stanza breaks along the middle of the chapters. Basically, the formatting for this book kind of drove me crazy throughout the entire book. The second thing I didn't like about this one is that there's an overall obsession with sex in this book that takes me away from the plot. That's all I'm comfortable saying on this topic. The third thing I didn't love about this one is that the characters and the plot are ultimately a little bit confusing. It would be difficult or impossible for me to give you an outline of the events in this story, never mind telling you which ones happened first. The last thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that there are footnotes throughout this entire book, and the footnotes just didn't work for me. I get what they were trying to do, but ultimately it just didn't work. I'm one of those people who feels like footnotes should belong in maybe historical stories or historical fiction stories, not in complete fantasy. So what did I like about this one? Well, the first thing is that the concept of automatons, and I might be saying that word wrong, given to people by gods is actually kind of cool. The second thing I liked about this one is that mentally connecting to people or things is a really neat idea and something I would have liked played with a little bit more. It's interesting to watch how that played out for these characters, specifically for a character who was blind. That was something really cool, and I'm imagining that the author might play around with that in sequels or future books. It's not something that I've looked into, so I don't know if sequels exist. But that concept was kind of cool, and I would like to see that played around with a little bit more. The third thing I liked about this one is I can say this book does not take itself too seriously at all. It's almost like a parody of a book making fun of itself, which is kind of fun. So who do I think should read this one? If you are the kind of reader who enjoys parodies or books concepts that are almost making fun of themselves, I think you might actually enjoy this one. My overall rating, I reserve 2 stars for books that have problematic elements, so I have to give this one 2 stars. The plot needs tightening, and in my opinion, that formatting needs to be fixed. So 2 stars for The Automation by BLA. The 4th book I've read since the last time I did a review is Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. This is a 2018 publication by Flatiron Books. It is age category adult and genre mystery thriller, and it is 262 pages. Your synopsis. My name is Amber Reynolds. There are 3 things you should know about me. 1, I'm in a coma. 2, my husband doesn't love me anymore. 3, sometimes I lie. What didn't I like about this book? The first thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that I wanted the story to keep going. I wanted like 50 more pages. I can work this one out further in my head, but the story that was being told so beautifully that I just want to keep listening to this author tell me about it. The second thing I can say that I didn't like, and this is kind of a content warning for readers, is that sexual assault is there in this book, and it is not pretty. I mean, is it ever? But it's not pretty. It is there in this book, and it will make you uncomfortable. The third thing I can say I didn't like about this one, and actually I kind of like this, but some of you might not, it does have an unreliable narrator. I personally love a narrator that you have to wonder if they're being truthful or if they're completely lying to you, but if you don't, you won't like this book. So what did I like? I liked the unreliable narrator. Oh my goodness, this one came right out in the first little line and told us, like I just told you in the synopsis, that sometimes she lies. I mean, it's in the title. Who isn't going to spend the rest of the book trying to figure out what the narrator's telling you that might be a lie? I thoroughly enjoyed dissecting everything this character said to find the lies. The second thing I can say I loved about this one, it is twisty-turny to the max. It's been a long time since I've read a book, even a thriller, where I had to stop and go, oh my God. Like, there were times where I had to stop, put my hands to my face, and catch my breath because I was totally shocked by a twist. That's a wonderful feeling when you enjoy thrillers, and I got that from this book, so I have to say I loved it. Third thing I liked about this book is the coma. That's a strange thing to say, so let me explain. I read a book not long ago where the main character was in a coma of some kind after an accident, and it was not well written. In that book, I ripped it to shreds about the coma, and that I didn't like the way they had written it. In this book, this is how it should have been written all the time. This is what that other author was trying to do. This book explores that feeling of the character being stuck, and I adored that. So who do I think should read this one? If you're the fan of a mystery that you just have to figure out, you're going to love this one. If you like psychological thrillers, if you liked Gone Girl, I think you'll enjoy this one because you're going to be shocked. My overall rating, I went 5 stars for this one. I think even if you're not the kind of reader who normally reads psychological thrillers, you're going to be completely excited by this one. It definitely transcends genres. It will shock you and wow you in really, really cool ways. I will absolutely add this one to my new favorites list. So 5 stars to Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. The 5th book I read since the last time I did reviews is Where There's Smoke by Jodi Picoult. This is a 2014 release by Ballantine Books. It is adult age category, genre contemporary, and it is 119 pages. I should mention this was the audiobook version, which means it's actually 2 short stories in one book. So this is a combined review for Where There's Smoke and Larger Than Life. These are both short story prequels to Jodi's books Leaving Time. You get to find out, as a synopsis, what Serenity and Alice were both doing before the events of Leaving Time. So what didn't I like? Honestly, these 2 prequels read like research or practice chapters Jodi might have done to get herself ready for reading Time. They're not as interesting as the book itself. The second thing I didn't really like about this one is that Serenity's story stops at a weird spot. It doesn't pick up right there when you read Leaving Time either, which means I have unanswered questions that, as far as I know, will never be answered. The third thing I can say is that I felt like we didn't need all the backstory between Alice and her mother. That stuff I never really felt like I was missing when I read the book, and I don't see how it was important in the short story, and I just feel like it could have been left out altogether. So what did I like about this book? Well, first I can say Serenity as a character is wonderful. I loved her in Leaving Time. I love this little glimpse into her backstory. In fact, I wish Serenity's backstory had been just a little bit longer. I love her, and I find her very, very interesting. The second thing I loved about these short stories is that the stuff with Alice and the elephant in Alice's backstory is great. If her entire backstory had been just her and the elephant, cut the stuff about her mother, I think I might have rated this book a little higher. The third thing I can say I loved about this one is that Jodi's descriptions and writing, as always, are absolutely beautiful. Jodi Picoult is one of my favorite authors because nobody writes descriptions like she does. Her language is perfect. Her figurative language is just masterful. For that alone, this book would be recommended. Who do I think should read this one? This is going to be a pretty niche audience, which should give you a hint about the rating that's coming. If you read Leaving Time and you liked Leaving Time and you just want more of these characters, or if you had questions about the backstories to these characters, you're going to love this book. My overall rating, I had to go 3 stars on this one. The stories aren't bad, but they would not stand alone. For that reason, this has a 3-star niche audience rating because it's really for fans of Leaving Time. So 3 stars for Jodi Picoult's Where There's Smoke. Okay, that's it for me and my reviews of the next 5 books that I've read. Please remember to drop a comment if there's a book that you've read here that I've reviewed or you have a question about what I'm doing. If you're an author or a publisher who had a part in bringing a book to life and you'd like me to review it right here on this channel, check the description where I'll give you a link to a document where you can submit it for review. I should mention, if you are an author or a publisher and you have an audiobook available now, please make sure to tell me that you have that format available. The wait time for audiobooks is shorter than the review time for any other book. Drop a comment so I know you're here. Hit subscribe so you know when I'm back. Keep plotting the path to your dreams, and I will see you next time. Bye!